when we heard about the danger of alienation, yeah, connected with the increasing use of artificial intelligence, yeah, and so one of the counter strategies might be to promote digital humanism. And digital humanism is the topic of this workshop, and I'm very pleased to welcome here Arne Bathke and Michael Stampfer, who will give us input. Arne Bathke is professor of mathematics and statistics. Yeah? He, after a training in mathematics at the University of Göttingen, yeah, and various other research stays, he then taught statistics at the University of Kentucky for 11 years, and now he's teaching at the University of Salzburg, where he's also the dean of the faculty for statistics and analytical sciences. And we are very happy to have him here for the second time in the summer discourse, so let's give him a warm welcome. Michael Stampfer is not here for the second time, but for the, I don't know, 10th time. Yeah? He is one of our huge supporters, and also somebody whom we invite very fondly, because he always gives excellent input. Digital humanism is a topic which is close to your heart, Michael. Michael is a lawyer by training. He wrote a very remarkable dissertation, yeah, on the history of tenant protection law in Austria, and he then pursued a very successful career in the area of research organization, and now for more than 20 years he's managing the WWTF, the Wiener Wissenschafts- und Technologiefonds, which is the largest institution providing funds for research in the city of Vienna. And yeah, we are looking forward very much to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Franz Stefan, and thanks to the three speakers and to Iris for the great panel this morning. I took 6 pages of scribbled notes because there was so much condensed and also controversial information. There's a Gruner classic, it's called How Little We Know. I just looked up the lyrics. How little we know, how much to discover, what chemical forces flow from lover to lover. Here it's not about lover to lover, but technology and regulation and all these kinds. But we are really going into a kind of jungle, or a kind of ever more dense techno-social structure, which we sometimes can explain with and cope with and deal with very classical legal and economic and social and institutional instruments, like law against monopolies, or taxi license, local laws, where Uber ran into formidable problems with the city of Vienna because they said, no, you are not just a platform, you are something like a car loan company, and you have to, car hiring company, and you have to apply to certain laws, and which helps, and this is a first intro into digital humanism on the level of worker and employer relations, which helps also to say, not all of us, except of the happy few who are working in elite positions, are their own entrepreneurs with 90-cent hourly wage. Yeah, this is not an exaggeration. and where this spans from the bikers who bring you food, to the thousands of unseen people all over the world who do this kind of first level control on internet content. Yeah, it's not machines doing it. There is more and more also machines doing it, but there's perhaps 1 million of people in cramped dark rooms somewhere in the world, and nobody has a problem, or not enough people have a problem with not seeing them. Yeah, that's just one of the entry points to digital humanism. We came to digital humanism, which is basically the fact that we put human needs and human institutions into the limelight, into the center of discussions, how the digital revolution should look like. We came into that, and a number of persons like Niki and Iris and Silvia Kritzinger and others are sitting in the room also with these discussions, that we saw as research funders that when funding silo-style research, like more specified social science theory, or a more naive, and I will come back to that in a second, more naive engineering, computer science research, then we aggravate the problem because nobody is there, at least in the area, in our area, the Vienna area, to be able, nobody but the guy who is filming us at the moment, because he did that already long before we were there, but nobody is there to deal with the digital revolution in a way that we are not just hopping behind it, yeah, like trying to capture something that has already gone out of control. And here was always the problem that having funded for 30 years or so computer scientists, that they love elegant solutions from A to B, not minding whether this destroys the society on another end of the calculus, or that they start with often a very libertarian idea. Our technology will free the world, and free the world of the despotic state and of taxes and of middlemen and all these things that have been built up nicely over centuries to build a functioning complex society. We don't need complexity, we have this peer-to-peer digital world. And unfortunately, and there's a wonderful guy which we hope that he will talk also in Vienna in fall, a Finnish researcher called Vili Lehton-Virta, who is working in Oxford, who wrote a great book called Cloud Empires, where he shows in 15 case stories when you have more than 10,000 to 100,000 people in a digital network, on a digital platform, then all kind of self-control collapses, and you have the crooks coming in, and the bugs coming in, and all the bad things coming in. And then you need a regulator, you need an ordering force, and then they say, that's ourselves. We, those who run the platform, are the ones who regulate what's good or bad, yeah, and not the state and not the democracy. So, on the other hand, if they want to scale up, they need venture capitalists, and when venture capitalists come in, all the non-capitalist rules are out of there, blown away. So we need a kind of human-centered approach to the digital world. And I want to end with two small points. First is I was staying at Kirchenwirt, and the Kirchenwirt hotelier needs to apply to 5,000 rules on how to host guests, how to bring edible, safe food, how to keep the kitchen clean. And the big platform companies for 40 years, for ideological and graft and other reasons, managed to say, we are not there, we are not responsible, we are not place-based, we are not employers, we are nothing. And this is unacceptable. This destroys, together with fake news and monopolism and other things, this destroys our society and democracy. This does not make us better. It makes things worse. So regulation is necessary. And also on the political level, regulation is necessary. Our ancestors fought for rule of law, for social market economy, for free speech, for human and fundamental rights, for democracy. We have to find new forms, and I like the way the Commission is and the Europe is experimenting with how to deal with building and changing institutions in a broader social science sense, due to the possibilities but also challenges of the digital revolution, through regulation and not through laissez-faire. So I'm a pro-regulation guy, here's a pro-ethics guy, and I will hand over to Arne. We are not really, we will not fight each other, and it's more about you than about us. One last comment, as an innovation and research guy who wants economic dynamics coming from innovation, I'm of course deeply bothered by the question why Europe is not that innovative anymore. But I guess there are also other reasons and not only regulation overload that led to that. It has something to do with culture, with mindset, with availability of financial means for certain things, with a culture of having the chance to begin again, and also with the lack of long-term high-risk public finance for research, where DARPA and the National Science Foundation and other US institutions have started 50 years before we started in Europe with that kind of research funding. So it's not only a regulation that keeps us back. That's my intro, a little longer than expected, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for introducing the topic. I will stand here for most of the time so you can see me better, I can see you better. I will also move there back in a second. So, humanism, digital humanism. I think data and ethics are a big part of that, so I will talk a little bit about that. Just very few slides, and then we hope to get into some discussion together. Sorry, Nikolaus, that you had to move the camera a little bit. The title of the whole summer discourse is curiosity. So learning about everything, about the world. And we follow, in my field, in the data science field, we follow a certain workflow, how we try to find answers to questions. So Nikolaus asked some questions in his keynote talk 2 days ago, some very basic questions. How do we find the scientific evidence that is solid scientific evidence to basic questions or to more complicated questions? And we'll go through that, and then I add some layers, and then we will discuss. So how do we find these questions? And this is actually, this workflow, I have tried to use modern technology and modern terminology when putting this together, but it's basically the same workflow that has been followed in the field of statistics, which as a real scientific field exists for about 100 years, for all these 100 years, right? Just using different terms. Statistics as the field of making sense of data. Now I'm moving back there for a second because I want to just show. Get this for you, Mike. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, for the move with the mic here. Because one term that's important is trust, right? And that was mentioned also this morning by Dr. Shima. And you know that in the United States, dollar bill, this is the top side. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, do I have to move it to the other screen then, or? Maybe we can just duplicate the screen, yeah, right. It always reverts to the old setting.
No.
Awesome. So you know that, maybe? You've been traveling there. And you see that on the back side, on the reverse side, if I can go there. Oh, doesn't. Oh, that's sorry. Here we go. It says, "In God we trust." So there's the term trust. And no, the whole why I'm coming here to tell you this. Yeah. So this is what is on the dollar bill, and we as statisticians, we always add. So in God we trust. All others have to bring data, and so it's not just bringing the data, but we as data scientists, we try to make sense of that data, and this is the process. And now I will go a little bit about these points, and this is what every data scientist, every statistician learns in their courses, and just out of curiosity, are there any mathematicians or statisticians, data scientists here, fellow sort of from my field? So it's maybe new to you, or maybe you've seen it in other contexts. The first and very important thing is to ask the right questions, to ask good questions. And then as we talk about the other layers, the other dimensions, how we can look at these, the workflow, asking the question has some personal connotation. You can already introduce a bias by asking a certain question or asking another question. Asking good questions, asking relevant and sensible questions. After that, you have to get data, acquire data. And there was also, I think Dr. Steinmauer said this this morning, there's something about data quality. It wasn't one of the documents, I think you showed it, or was it somebody else? Or was it Dr. Shima? The quality of data is really important. It doesn't help to have a lot of data, have big data. There was a hype about big data for some years, but it's really the good data, the appropriate data to answer that question. How do you acquire data that is good, that makes sense in order to answer the question? Then you have the data, you describe it, you do some quality checks, some pre-processing and so on. And while you pre-process, you may find that there are some oddities, that things cannot be true. So we do work together with biologists, for example, ecology data. That was last year. We had a data set on butterflies and on all sorts of little insects, and I decided never to travel to Luxembourg because we had these bugs from Luxembourg that were so big in the data set, which is kind of creepy if you go to a small country, have these bugs. But there was a mislabeling in the file, and there were centimeters instead of millimeters. So that kind of stuff you find in pre-processing, discovering patterns, anomalies, and everybody does that in this process to check whether it can be true what you see in the data. Big companies do it because otherwise they fail with their investments, and we do it in science too. Then the next big step is prediction generalization. And that's why I said statistics is only 100 years old, because all the other stuff up to then has been done way before. But the prediction, the inferential predictions, the generalization, that needed probability theory, and probability theory was not discovered or created until about 110, 120 years ago. So that's the bigger step that requires some math. Then it needs to be interpreted with regard to the questions that you have. And then needs to be communicated. And there I can come back again to Nicolaus' presentation where he talked about the stories that we tell each other or that we tell ourselves about the world that we create, the stories. You need to communicate the results to the target audience, to whoever you want to address. And so that's the basic steps. And one can talk a whole semester about these steps, of course, about all the details. Then, adding another layer, another dimension, at each of these steps, there are some very technical questions, like how do you get a good sample? How do you make this prediction? How do you do it right? Technical questions for which you will ask the data scientist, the statistician, the computer scientist, and so on. Then there are most likely ethical questions. What the questions, which questions do you ask? What kind of data can you use? What kind of inference do you want to make? What do you want to communicate? To whom do you want to communicate? Do you want to communicate to everybody the same thing? Those are ethical or touch on ethical questions. They relate to values questions. Do we follow some paradigm of European values when doing all these steps? What are the values that are underlying the way we address this? And this was discussed a lot this morning, regulative questions. Questions of policies, of regulations, and sometimes these things have to be balanced. So we have all these dimensions, and I say we balance utility and benefit, or these questions have to be balanced with utility and benefit. So for example, one could say you shouldn't use any personal data at all. No, say no health data. No health data should be used, should all be highly protected, but you would use the utility of making evidence-based statements about why certain treatments work and others don't. So there is always a balance. And the place where we put the fulcrum for the balancing this, it depends, of course, on our values, our value system, our ethics. And we had the discussion on with the child pornography, where do we put the balance? I mean, in this discussion this morning and the regulation. Okay, so I've added these dimensions, and now I'm adding another dimension. Now this is more about the ethics. When addressing the ethical questions, typically we follow the framework. It's called the FAT framework because it's a nice acronym. Fairness, transparency, accountability. Is it fair what we're doing? Is it transparent? Again, a term that was used quite a bit this morning. Transparency is important, and is somebody accountable? Is somebody responsible? Is somebody taking responsibility? Is somebody in charge of this whole thing? Whatever the topic may be. So that's kind of what we do when we talk about the ethics, or that is a framework that we could follow. There are other frameworks. And now I'm really adding another dimension, namely to whom does this apply? Do I talk about fairness towards the data subject? Do I talk about transparency for the data scientist? Does the data scientist know all about this stuff? And we distinguish the data subject and the model subject, and same with accountability. The data subject, imagine you want a loan. You're buying a house here in the Wolfgang, beautiful area. You want a loan from your bank, and the bank gives you an answer, whether you get a loan or what interest rate you might get. And they will look at your credit report. And they will compare this with others. And all the others that this is compared to are the data subjects whose data is being used by saying whether you should get a loan. So all the data from the history of this bank and from other banks, association that is kind of compiling this data. These are all the data subjects, and you, if you want to buy the house, you are the model subject because on you the model is applied. So are things fair to you? Are things fair to the data subjects? Are things transparent? Do all the data subjects know how their data is being used later? Do you know why your loan was denied or why the interest rate jumped by 0.5% all of a sudden? Is it transparent to you what model is being used? And what data is used at all? Do you as a model subject know what data is being used to make the decision? Niklaus made that point in the discussion also the day before yesterday on ChatGPT. We don't know what data is being used. We don't know what the underlying data is, right? So we have these different dimensions that we can discuss. When we have a case, a certain case, we can look at the workflow from these 6 points here. We can look at the different technical, ethical, and so on questions. The ethical we can break down if we want in this way, and to whom this applies. And maybe there are other entities, or maybe there are other people that I haven't listed here. Maybe there is something like a general population or others that could be added here. So this may not be comprehensive, but just a starting point for a discussion. Here are some cases. You've seen some cases these days. Just to give you a quick impression of what I mean behind these little bullet points. Some companies have released customer data, have anonymized it, or they thought they had anonymized it, according to the standards back then, and released it and say, can somebody help us make predictions better? And then people not only made predictions better, but they also said, you know, this is the 62-year-old guy from this town in somewhere in Arizona who used these search terms when he used AOL, or he checked out these videos when he used Netflix. So people could be re-identified later. And now we could go through this workflow and see what went wrong where. Data harvesting, Cambridge Analytica, of course, is famous, harvesting a lot of data from Facebook, saying, okay, we pay a few people to get to know a lot about them, and then we kind of include their friends into our network, and we analyze all that data, and to use it not just for targeted advertising. It's kind of a little bit of euphemism in this context here. Then a term that we discuss. So somebody famously said, get over it, you have zero privacy anyways, if you're working online, if you're doing something with the internet. And some people buy into that, say, okay, I don't care if I'm using WhatsApp, if I'm using Meetup, whatever, because I have zero privacy anyways. But would you be comfortable if your partner or hopeful partner knows every search term you put into a search engine or every message you send? And since, I mean, if we talk about reducing encryption, it could be the case that at some point your partner knows everything, or people know everything, that some chancellors do in what they thought was a private chat, interact with others, right? So another topic maybe to be discussed is Alexa or Google Home. These systems have to be trained. Obviously, to make a better system, you have to train it. And so you need to use the audio snippets, transcribe them, see if you answered the right questions, if you went into the right direction. However, does the person in whose home this device is, does the person know that this is really done a lot of times? And sometimes you call Alexa or Google Home, you activate them unknowingly, and they run, and it's being analyzed, and all this audio data is analyzed by some technicians who make their conclusions to improve the data science models. But was everybody aware that this was happening? And how do you solve that? Would you disallow that? Would you make a regulation saying this is not allowed? And then the community would say, well, yeah, that it's infringing on our rights to develop our technology, right? Government backdoors was already mentioned this morning, also in the context of the child pornography or other issues. Smartphone hacking, right? Should the government be allowed to get all the data from a smartphone in case of a crime? Human experimentation without us knowing. If you have a LinkedIn account like I do, and some others, somebody from this group has just contacted me this morning on LinkedIn. There's A/B testing is going on all the time. All the time we are being tested if we react to this or that. And sometimes different versions are deployed to different people. Recidivism prediction, if somebody was in jail, should be let free again, then there's some prediction based on AI. We've probably heard these cases. Redlining, that applies again to, say, mortgages. That redlining means if also in your mortgage application you say, I live in this neighborhood, I live in the neighborhood Bürgerstein, no problems in getting a mortgage, but some neighborhoods you may have issues. So the neighborhood itself determines, or is one of the factors to determine whether you should get a mortgage or not. And this has been a major issue in the US, where there is a lot of segregation in terms of neighborhoods where people live, black, white, and other neighborhoods. So that's a case of discrimination then. These are just basically some discussion starters. And with that, if you're interested more in this whole data ethics field, there's a nice new book by David Martens, which we have also used in a class this spring in the University of Salzburg. So a nice read. But with that, let me finish here and we go into some discussion, I suppose.